Hello, hello. Welcome into another episode of Note News. It's been a bit of a frustrating up and down week for the St. Louis Blues. They look decent under the hood. Under Jim Montgomery, they have statistically improved and looked okay in a lot of different ways, but those results still have not reached the win column in a consistent way. After back-to-back wins over the Calgary Flames, the Blues failed again to get a three-game win streak going against the Utah Hockey Club. So why can't they get over the hump and go on a streak? And with a difficult stretch coming through the end of January, is there any hope left for this team to make the playoffs? We'll talk about all that and more today on Note News. Well, it's like I said, kind of a frustrating week, baffling even. I was so excited. Alec texted you after the second win against Calgary, and I was like, I might be bought back in. I think I was saying after this week I would be able to like say one way or another. I was like, are we back? We just picked up like 4 points in the standings. It was super exciting, and I feel so deflated. I was like one more, and I'm like one more, and I'm bought back in. If they can
Three
beat
wins in a
Utah,
row.
if they can beat Utah and get to 3 wins in a row for the first time, I'll be bought back in. And then of course they just go and lay an egg against the Utah Hockey Club and lose that game last night. Super frustrating. This team is befuddling. Um, how do you feel watching this team overall? I mean, like in general, this week, what are your feelings and vibes around the Blues right now?
Yeah, befuddling. It just feels like there's something holding them back that they can't get over this really weird hump of not being able to win three straight games, and it's really frustrating too because the standings are sort of right there for them to make a push. Like it seems like no one really wants this second wild card spot,
Yeah.
or no one's like fighting for it hard, but here we are, and the Blues still are on the outside looking in, despite having what feels like a good month of play. Their point differential is getting better. Their finishing is back, and now they're back to scoring goals, getting their goal differential a lot better. But then their goaltending falls off, and there's always something like this team just can't put it all together. And that is kind of the way sports goes. That generally you want better talent because talent gives you a better chance to keep things okay when everything isn't locked in sync, which so rarely happens. But it's just
Yeah.
I still think that this team is just a couple pieces away from being a true threat. But as I've been saying, like I want them to prove me wrong. I really want them to show that they have some metal here. It's just that every time they get to that chance to prove their worth, they fumble it. It's the Columbus game. It's now the Utah game. It just feels like
Mhm.
they come out flat, and I think we're gonna get into a little bit why that might be here. But yeah, it's frustrating.
Yeah, and it's hard to dissect. Like we'll try to talk about some of it, but honestly, like it could just come down to being a mental thing, like some kind of mental block, and they're just unable to lock in for that third game. I just wanted to say real quick, if you're new to Note News, we're a St. Louis Blues podcast. We go live at least once a week, and very often twice a week when we can manage it. We talk about all things Blues, from prospects to rumors, trade deadlines, and game breakdowns, so all that stuff. So if you would like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, we'd appreciate that. We're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, so if you prefer to listen to audio, and you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Note News Pod. There was a second there where we thought we might have to take TikTok out of our plugs blurb there, but no, it's back apparently. So we're keeping it in for now. There's something fun I wanted to talk with you about before we get into blue stuff. Is this like one of the more exciting Hart Trophy races we've had in a while in the NHL? Like it feels like it's always the same guys, McDavid, McKinnon, guys like that. This might be one of the more entertaining Hart Trophy races I can recall in recent memory. Like, I think you can make a case for Nathan McKinnon. I think you can make a case for if you can sort of get back going, Kirill Kaprizov. I think who I want to see it go to, and if he keeps it up, is Connor Hellebuck. Um,
Mm.
I could even see a case for Quinn Hughes. Quinn Hughes looks like of all the skaters in the NHL, probably the most important for his team's success. You look at the stats when he's on the ice for the Vancouver Canucks versus when he's off the ice. It's a huge difference. Um, but yeah, I mean, what do you think about this year's Hart Trophy race? I also want to say your preseason pick for the Hart, Jack Eichel, looks like he could be in that conversation too. He is by far the Vegas Golden Knights' best player. Um, One thing that's interesting about him is that he is a consistent contributor for them at 5-on-5 on the power play and on the PK. Like he is just all around so valuable. Um, and you saw it coming, man. But yeah, what are your thoughts on the Hart?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I could say it's the best. I think I was really partial to last year. I think last year it just ended up so fascinating for me with
Yeah,
McDavid being McDavid, McKinnon having just an all-time season offensively and defensively. And then like Austin Matthews scoring 60 plus goals with Selke level defense.
yeah,
How is that not the MVP? Like there's just so many fascinating that's the case for him. I'm not saying that Matthews had my vote. I probably would have picked
yeah,
him.
yeah,
But yeah, I just think that was such a fascinating. But I really like your idea here about Connor Hellebuck. I think that we really could see a, perhaps the next goalie Hart because the Winnipeg Jets have kind of fallen off as a team as of
hmm
the recent games played. Excuse me, but their record still hasn't because Connor Hellebuck. I mean, there's a post going around from like the NHL themselves about how Hellebuck is just breaking the charts on all of their like NHL Edge stats for goalies,
hmm
which is just so hilarious. And I do think I'm a little bit partial to that now. Man, now you've put it in my head, and I think that's you might have already sold me on it because like
Yeah,
it's so rare to see a goalie so consistently dominate and be like a moving force in the NHL, or rather an unmovable force. I mean,
yeah,
even when Shesty had his like incredible run that all culminated in his Vezina trophy, as soon as he won his Vezina, he went back to, or not went back, but he sort of regressed to being a top 25-ish goalie, where he is, and now he's sort of re-emerging back into the top 10. But with Hellebuck, it's like he's always been good his whole career, and he's only getting better. And
yeah,
yeah, one I'm pretty sure it was unanimous. It should have been unanimously won the Vezina last year, and is running away with the like he's putting last year's season to shame.
yeah. He looks even better somehow. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
it may or may not be the right pick, but I think it would be a really fun storyline to watch his odds as the race progresses.
Yeah, obviously goalies are like the most important player for any team. So I don't think it makes a lot of sense to like. There's an argument that a lot of people make that a goalie should win the Hart every year because they're the most important player for their team, and I'm not a fan of that. Um, but when a goalie is having like a possibly historic season like Hellebuck is right now, like I think the Hart Trophy is the place in that instance to maybe remember the season that he's having and sort of I don't know if I guess set own right like remembering the season that he had. But yeah, super fun Hart race. We'll keep an eye on that one. My Jack Hughes pick is not looking good. I guess I picked the wrong Hughes brother this year because Quinn Hughes looks like he has a better shot. But anyway,
Which
we're
is
here to
so
talk.
weird because the
Yeah,
Devils are like still a really really good team, and I
yeah,
mean he's having a good season, but yeah, you'd
yeah,
think if they were gonna have a like this complete of a season that Jack Hughes would be part of the picture, but yeah, just
yeah. It's yeah.
sports are weird to predict.
Sport's gonna sport, I guess. But yeah, we're here to talk about the Blues, who I don't really know what to make of this team right now. Like just looking at their overall statistics under Montgomery, like they look decent, like they look pretty solid. At least compared with under Drew Bannister, they have improved almost across the board. Um, their goal differential looks good. This is something you pointed out to me. Like their point pace is in a good spot, but I think where the trouble comes from is having started a little slower under Drew Bannister. If they had a point pace like this all season, they would probably be like potentially holding a wild card spot right now. Um, but Jim Montgomery took over maybe just a little too late. There's nothing you can do on that front, but Um, their point pace right now under Montgomery is around 89, I believe. Before the Utah game, it was around 93. So I mean, he's still like in the point where wins and losses can fluctuate that number a lot. But you know, 89. If you get that all season, that pace, you're in the wild card race. You know, all season. And like I said, the goal differential numbers look good. You pulled that stat before the episode. You want to get into that a little bit, just the goal differential numbers and how the Blues sort of measure up with some of the teams they're competing with.
Yeah, so the like this is why it's so frustrating because the team is performing well and they're scoring goals and they're not allowing too many against, but it's all coming at the right or at the wrong time, excuse me. So in January so far, the Blues have excuse me, I believe a +5 goal differential, and right now they have the best goal differential of any like team still in the hunt for the wild card 2 spot. In the wild card 1 seems pretty locked up right now between like the if the Kings fall out of it, their differential is amazing. The Avalanche have it right now; their differential is really good, and the Wild and Stars. It seems like the Wild could be taking a downtrend because if you look at their goal differential, which is +4. But anyways, of the wild card 2 race, so I'm looking at the Flames, the Canucks, the Blues, and Utah. And if you even want to throw in Seattle in there, the Blues right now have the best goal differential at -6, which was -4 before last night's deflating loss. The Flames, who we just beat twice, have a -12 goal differential. The Canucks, who are 2 points ahead of us, have a -14 goal differential. Utah has -10, and Seattle is -13, which is a very rudimentary stat, but rudimentarily applied, you could say that perhaps that they are overperforming how their actual talent should be. The Blues, as I said, have a -6, which is not only single digits, but is also very close to a positive goal differential. And I actually kind of expect that it will be a positive goal differential by the end of March, probably, unless we really sell off. But that goes to show that the Blues should be a much better team and really should have a lot more wins that they do. But every time they win back-to-back games, they just go too crazy the night before our game, I guess, or maybe there's some actual statistics behind it, but
Celebrating those back-to-back wins too hard to the point where they can't get the back-to-back-to-back.
yep.
You might be onto something there. I saw today that they are the only team in the league that has yet to win three in a row. Like that is just inexcusable, I guess is the right word there. I mean, if you have playoff aspirations, you have to be able to string together more than three wins in a row. You just have to do it, especially with what the Blues have coming up, which we'll talk about towards the end of the episode, looking ahead at the upcoming schedule. So we don't have to get into it now, but um, the time is kind of past to put together, a solid win streak and hope to hold on to whatever spot you have. It seems like so. It's going to be a tough uphill battle for the Blues. I mean, continuing to look at what has been going well for the Blues, which is part of why this is so baffling and befuddling and frustrating to watch. I mean, their 5-on-5 numbers look good under Montgomery. Like their goals for and expected goals for look solid. It's the same with goals against and expected goals against. And their special teams have um, struggled over Montgomery's entire tenure, but recently have done okay. Like in that back to back against Calgary, the penalty kill looked fantastic. I think I believe I might have these numbers slightly wrong, but I believe the PK went 3 for 3 in those two games and only gave up one shot, which is fantastic. Like that's what you want out of your penalty kill. So if you can get that on a consistent basis, if they can continue to see those results from their penalty kill, that's great. Um, their power play as well did okay over those two games and have done okay over the past couple weeks, but still not really where you want it to be. And so I think that's that's a big issue, and we'll shift to talking about the issues here in a sec. But I mean, even look at players like Dylan Holloway, right? Dylan Holloway has taken huge steps this season and has become like an actual player and definitely one of the Blues' top players. Um, Colton Parayko as well has been on a tear, like an absolute tear, and he is, as I um, as I am pleased to have called early on, he is on track to have a career year offensively. So I love to see that from him. Cam Fowler, of course, has been great. Robert Thomas has looked good, aside from last night, probably. Um, the usual guys look pretty good. One thing that I want to talk about real quick, while we're still on the subject um, of things that are going well, is the second line. Holloway, Shin, and Kyrou has been um, a fantastic line,
Yeah.
a fantastic forward line for the Blues, and probably their best line, um, especially recently. It seems like Montgomery feels like he's struck gold with that one because he has not mixed that one up in a long time. He's kept those three together, and the results are there. They're battling. They look great as a two-way line. They're scoring a lot, and they're also not giving up a whole lot either. So I'm really liking what we see from that line. Do you have anything to add on any of those players I just mentioned, or that second forward line there?
Yeah, that second line is really kind of carrying the team right now.
Yeah.
And I think you could take it with every player on that line. Like you said, Holloway coming into his own. This is start of the season, we really thought Broberg was the guy. Now it's looking like Holloway was the steal in the offer sheet move. And don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
both were incredible, excellent ads. But Holloway is approaching pace for a 30 goal season. It's sort of the numbers get conflated if he's having a good stretch of games or a bad stretch of games, but has a shot to sniff a 30 goal season, which is incredible for his first full NHL season. He is such a stalwart defensive forward too. His plus minus numbers look great because of it, but I think that's kind of what you're seeing from this second line is defense really complementing offense in ways that
Hmm.
like the bottom six seem really more defensively oriented, which is helping, but they can't produce off of that. Holloway and Kyrou just have such speed that they can really take advantage of their defensive game. I want to get to Kyrou last though. Shen has been excellent this season too. He is having a seriously resurgent year, which is just so good to see. You really love to see it out of a guy, Braden Shen, who is now 33. So still doing it. He is at 28 points in 47 games, so it looks like he's going to blow past his mark last year, which was 46 points in a full season's worth. It looked like his career was coming to an end, and now it looks like we have sort of the Shen of old, a 50, maybe 60. I don't know if he'll get to. It seems like he won't get to 60 this year, but a 50-point producer as your second line center, sure, you could definitely do a lot better. Like if Shen was your 3C, but still,
Hmm.
the other thing with Shen too is that his defensive game has been really, really good.
Yeah.
His blocks this year are already nearing career totals. He's got 31 blocks in the season. His career high was actually last year with 51. So he was really putting a lot into his defense last year. It's just that he was so slow and couldn't get help from his line mates that his plus minus is an ugly minus 22 last year. This year's plus minus is 0. So for a guy who takes a lot of minutes, average time on ice this year is 17 minutes 39 seconds. That's not a little bit, for to have a 0 plus minus for such a slow and lethargic player. I think the other thing too is Shen. You really see that physical edge back to his game. Really being willing to uh, throw his body around and get in
Right.
some scraps every now and then. Like
Hmm.
do captain things. And honestly, like it fires me up. But Jordan Kyrou, man, this like I was thinking about tweeting this out the other night, but he is here. This is the Kyrou we were waiting for.
Hmm.
We've been waiting to see in a full season. This is it. Like Kyrou, I think is at his zenith right now, and it is awesome. He has been, as I said, his defensive game has gotten incredible this year. He's been just so good, like so crafty at knowing where to put his stick or how to use his body to force someone on the wall, and where you can have guys like Braden Shen, Jake Neighbors, Even a Tyler Tucker, like someone who likes to throw hits around. What Jordan Kyrou will do is he'll pin them up by the blue line corner so that they have to throw it down low, and that just gives our hard hitters who are down near the goaltending a chance to do their magic. So Kyrou is so well complementing this team, not to mention just having a stalwart offensive season, 20 goals, 19 assists. He's doing it all. I mean, he's getting assists, primary and secondary.
Hmm.
You see him a lot dishing it off on rush chances to guys like Neighbors or Holloway,
Right.
or even occasionally Broberg back in the back in the day.
Back in the
Um,
day.
but his offensive creativity still isn't like exceptional, but it's enough. And
Yeah.
Kyrou himself sort of creates this magnet effect where he can draw defenders away from because they know he's such a strong offensive threat, that he will create. It's the same, like it's why Robert Thomas is so valuable. You know, good players create good opportunities for their teammates, and Kyrie has really been able to do that on top of his speed still being there to create offensive chances for himself, and then just really having a pinpoint shot this year. That
Hmm.
goal against it was I believe the second game in Calgary where he just gets it right in the slot and it was like no chance for the goalie. Like he just got beat. And that's a shot that Kyrie used to ring off the post or
Yeah.
throw. You know, he would miss the net just slightly wide, or it'd be a little bit too low, and the goalie could get it with his pad or whatever. Like
Hmm.
all of the time, you know, it's the same thing with Robert Thomas. Is that every season he's gotten a little better. All of the time, the struggles, the frustrations that Jordan Kyrou has had throughout his career has all led to this season, and he is here, and I am loving it. So I think that second line really has been carrying play off of a strong resurgent season from Braden Shen, off of
Hmm.
a new rising budding star in Dylan Holloway, and then potentially a rising like superstar in Jordan Kyrou.
Yeah. Jordan Kyrou has an outside shot right now at 40 goals this season if he can pick up his pace just a little. I think he's on pace for like 34 or 35 right now. So if he can just, get a Hattie or something in there, then he'll, he has a chance for sure. So I'm really liking what we're seeing from Jordan Kyrou, like you said. Just to characterize this second forward line real quick before we move on. Looking at some of the numbers, like watching them on the ice, they're good. You can see the chemistry, like you said. You can see it on both sides of the ice. Um, defense begetting offense. That's another thing that we've talked about a lot. But you look at the numbers, and it kind of stands out, honestly, how good this line has been in both ways. First of all, I mean they've got a solid Corsi percentage of 55.8, meaning that they're dominating the shooting game. They have 234 shot attempts for, 185 against. They've got the let's see of forward groups that have played the at least 200 minutes, right? So this line of um, Holloway, Shin, and Kyrie, they've played 208 minutes together. So of forward lines that have played roughly the same, number of minutes together, uh, this line has given up the let's see, looking at the numbers here, they're tied for the third fewest goals against. In those 208 minutes, 27 games, they have only given up 6 goals. They have scored 13 goals. Looking at like per 60, that's a 3.74 goals for per 60 and a 1.72 goals against per 60. Um, I mean, it's just like it's unreal how good this line is being. They're up there, with a lot of solid lines, like a lot of the Carolina lines when it comes to like the shot attempts metrics. That's like the name of the game in Carolina is shooting it from anywhere. And so they're right up there with those lines in that regard, and that's good company to be in for sure. Um, Looking at expected goals percentage, they are fourth. They've got a 62.9 expected goals percentage. The line that they're right behind in that metric is Hyman, McDavid, and Nugent Hopkins. That's, I mean, pretty good company to be in. And so I really like what we're seeing from this line, and I like what we found from, I like what Jim Montgomery has found from that line, and I especially like that he's sticking to it. That's one of the things that we talked about when Jim Montgomery took over. It's good to have a little bit of flexibility with the lines, right? And have players working in and out at times, but having, some set expectations for these guys, especially someone like Dylan Holloway, who's still kind of learning the ropes in St. Louis, having some consistency, I think, can be really valuable. And so I like that he's been sticking with it. And obviously, these players are comfortable with each other, and the results are there. So that's been fantastic to see. Um, but yeah, really, really like what we're seeing from those guys. That's enough. That's enough positivity. All right, let's start talking about some of the negatives here.
We are
Um,
outside of a playoff spot.
we are outside of a playoff spot. As it stands today, the St. Louis Blues only have 48 points, which is right in the mushy middle, man. They are currently 3 points out of the second wild card spot, which is currently held by the Calgary Flames at 51. Vancouver Canucks are right behind them with 50. And right behind the Blues are Utah with 45 and Seattle with 43. Anaheim with 42. Can they do it? No, they cannot. But yeah, so that's where it stands today. I think you would really hope for the Blues to have won last night and be right in the mix there. Kind of a deflating loss. But despite all of those good metrics that we just broke down, looking at that forward line that we just talked about, and some singling some players out and their performances, despite all of those positives, they just can't put it together. They can't get over that hump. They can't put a win streak together. And those positive results kind of have yet to reach the win column in any meaningful way, or at least in any consistent way. So the big question is why? Why can't they translate some of their under the hood, statistical, analytical success? Why can't that translate to wins? Why can't that translate to climbing the standings a little bit? What's the issue here? Alec and I don't have all the answers, but we can surmise a couple of things, right?
If there
So
was one answer, then they wouldn't be losing.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's a number of things, and it's kind of like I think as we'll sort of tease out in our discussion, death by a thousand cuts is what it seems like. But Alec, do you want to start us off? I mean, what is one of the biggest reasons that you think has what do you think is one of the biggest reasons why the Blues have struggled to find any consistency when putting together a win streak?
I think there's two really big things that catch my attention in watching these games, which I guess is, if you caught a couple episodes back, we talked about how good the defense is the other two groups that aren't the defense, the forwards and the goaltending. I'll talk about the forwards first, but I think there's issues all up and down the lines, with the exception of the second line, as we I would hope made clear to our viewers. So I think the big thing, first of all, is that Thomas has really been slumping. He still isn't a negative on the ice because he's Robert Thomas. Like, he's having a bad month, but by his standards, he still has 5 points in 8 games. That's like average for even a guy like Jordan Kyrou, or used to be. Now Kyrou's sort of. Anyways, so yeah, Thomas in January has 5 points in 8 games, versus in December he had 19 points in 14 games. So you're really not seeing Thomas sort of carrying the load that we expected, or like we are used to.
Yeah.
And that's a big ask, but also he is your 1C, he is your franchise player. So at some point you do kind of need him to step up. So I think partially the Blues' inability to put together a streak here is the team will go as its best player goes, when that best player drives so much of the Blues' identity. If Connor McDavid or Sidney Crosby were having a bad month, now they don't because they're Connor McDavid and Sidney Crosby, but if they ever do, then I'm sure the Penguins and Oilers, and actually we saw this kind of, I think it was last year, the Oilers just couldn't get anything going for like the first 4 or 5 months of play, and a big part of that was McDavid and Draisaitl were not playing up to their standards. This is what happens when your good players don't perform. So Thomas has been okay defensively, and offensively it just doesn't. I don't think it. I don't want to say it's lack of effort, because I don't think it's ever lack of effort with Robert Thomas. It just, and also I don't want to entirely write off as just, well, he has bad line mates, so he isn't producing because he has bad line mates. Well, I think that's certainly part of it. He isn't getting much help Neighbors is still scoring goals, but we kind of knew that that was his one thing, and he's getting out physical a little bit. I think the pendulum will swing back with Neighbors, and it's kind of
Yeah.
started. It has started to do so.
Yeah.
Um, but anyways, I think line mates are definitely an issue, and I think putting guys like I don't know Texier or other sort of down the roster forwards on the first line isn't a great look. At the end of the day, too, and I guess Saad arguably isn't really a first line forward at all. That's also not Thomas's fault. That's a roster construction issue that this team is just lacking forwards. But anyways, this is all circling back to. I don't want to entirely write off that he has bad line mates, therefore he's not doing well. Even though that is certainly part of the thing. I think it's just that he doesn't quite have. He's slumping. He doesn't quite have the same ability to create like he had been because he was on just such a torrid stretch that he was bound to come back down to earth a little bit. I think he'll come back, and when he does, I think this team can start winning. But it sort of starts with him, and I think the other problem that Thomas is being left out to dry is Pavel Buchnevich has had a
Yeah.
really tough stretch of play for quite some time now. Um, so Buchnevich actually is pointless for his last 4 games. So if he doesn't score a point in his next game, that will be his longest stretch of pointless games the entire season. He
Yeah.
only had a 4 game stretch without scoring a point back from October 15th to October 22nd, which were when he was playing as a center, and also in that moment, in that time, the team was doing much better. So it feels a lot worse with Buchnevich, but he really has been struggling just to get. It seems like to get in advantageous situations. It seems like he's being boxed out by other forwards, isn't able to really release that wicked shot that we know he has. And it just feels like with Buchnevich, honestly, with Buchnevich, it just feels like a confidence thing. I feel like if you can have a solid stretch of, like a goal scoring stretch or a multi-point game or just something to get him his confidence back, um, then we can really start to see Buchnevich return to form. But ever since that Anaheim blowout where he had 2 points in that game, he's done nothing and really been poor defensively too, playing a lot of minutes on the ice.
Yeah.
I mean, you hate to mess with a good thing, but we just talked about um, how much better Kairu's been this year, and Buchnevich is hurting the team by playing first line minutes. You can't help but think maybe something could be done there. But regardless, even if the move isn't to change around the second line, which is working so well, Thomas and Buchnevich need to be better, and I think that's when this team can start winning. Outside of that, I think the bottom six has just been abysmal production wise. I think they've been
Mhm.
pretty good defensively, and that's sort of honestly like the bottom six of any NHL roster. You can't really expect a ton from, especially the fourth line. Like um, Toropchenko is really is up to I think 6 points on our Toropchenko point
Woo.
counter. I should double check that, but
Love that for
um,
him.
yeah. So, anyways, I do think that there has just been excuse me 7 points.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. Well, it's
Way to
not good
go.
enough.
Yeah. No, it's not.
Um, stop messing around, John. Um, yeah, you can't really expect your bottom six to produce because if you are expecting your bottom six to produce, then you are the best team in the National Hockey League. And
Yeah.
they've been okay defensively, but they haven't also been helping. It would if they had been found a time to um, hit their stride now when like the top line was struggling, then that would
Mhm.
really we would start to see a lot more wins on the win column.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of some of the magic of sports is you need like things to line up properly, and that's I think part of it is just everything isn't clicking into place for this team. There's so many good elements all around, but it just hasn't really meshed yet, and that's a big part of that is our foundation of the first line is kind of falling out.
Yeah. All good stuff. A lot to talk about there. I want to bring it first back to Pavel Buchnevich. And if anyone's watching live and has any ideas on any of these players or any ideas on the Blues struggles, feel free to drop them in the chat. Maybe we can get a chance to talk about them later on in the episode. Looking at Buchnevich, he's on track to have his fewest goals, assists, and points for a season since he joined the Blues. So, I mean, really uncharacteristic production that you're seeing out of him. That definitely isn't helping, right? He's supposed to be your one of your top three forwards for you, one of your top three scorers, and he just hasn't been that. I feel like we see this with a lot of players after they get an extension or a contract. They kind of have a bit of a dip in production. Maybe it's a mental thing. Like, I don't know what it is, and it's not everyone. But like even looking at a player like Elias Pettersson, we just talked about him in our last episode. Talked about whether the Blues should trade for him. So if you want to hear about some trade talk and trade, I guess,
It's a fun
fantasizing,
episode.
then yeah, go check that one out. That was a lot of fun. We had Sam on. But yeah, I feel like we see that a lot, where players' production takes a dip. So I don't know if I'm concerned yet because I think this is kind of a thing a lot of the time, right? You have that security. You're not playing to get that paycheck really as much, and maybe that's not a factor. Like, I don't know. I'm just sort of hypothesizing here, or taking shots in the dark on what's going wrong with Buchnevich. Part of it, I'm sure, um, is his utilization early on as a center. Right, he's not a natural center, and so he wasn't being utilized to his full, you know, his full, I guess, potential as a winger. So that can have helped. But do you think the Buchnevich contract was a mistake? Like, is it fair to call it that yet? I mean, it's obviously too soon. He's got a lot of term left on that contract, but knowing what we know now out of his production this year, like, what are your thoughts on the contract extension that he got from the Blues?
No, I wouldn't call it a mistake. I don't think I'm quite ready to be raising all red flags and just say Buchnevich has mailed it in at 29 years old, by the way. So he's going to be 30 soon, but still, I think Pavel Buchnevich has a lot of good hockey left in him. I think he's just having a down year, and I think
Yeah,
starting him at center sort of really set him back. And Buchnevich is just such the Mr. Consistency of all time that he doesn't really have the ability to work back up to where he normally would land as a number one winger, um, after that difficult start for him at a set as being a center. So I don't think the Buchnevich contract was a mistake, and especially because he doesn't at all rely. I mean, he does as in every hockey player does, but speed is not a part of his game. It's sort of what you would um, expect to go with age. So actually, I think Buchnevich as a hockey player is going to age really well, which means that this contract could end up being really good. But I think we're getting kind of ahead of ourselves here. I do think that there could be something to, especially even next season potentially. Maybe not next season, but so into his contract. I don't think he's going to be a first line winger for the entirety of his contract. Basically, I don't know when that change will happen, and
hmm
I'd be fine if they like played around with it this season and next, but I think he should still be a top six guy for and really a most primarily top line winger. It's just he's having a down year.
for sure. Yeah, and I mean that's been I think that's probably a pretty big reason for the Blues struggles. Like I said, it's a lot of things. This isn't just a one fix issue. If it was, like you said, the Blues would probably be in a wild card spot or something. But this is, like I said, he's supposed to be one of the Blues' top players, and having him struggle like this isn't helping things. Um, got a question in the chat from Ben about Buchnevich's production with and without Jordan Kyrou. Looking at some stats from Natural Stat Trick, it looks like the expected numbers aren't really that different for Pavel Buchnevich, either with Jordan Kyrou or without. They're sort of in a similar spot. So in terms of like the quality of play that they're generating, sort of in a general sense, it's about the same. But you look at the actual results, and obviously that's what matters, and it is a little different. In particular, the goals for percentage of those two together is 63.64, and Pavel Buchnevich without Jordan Kyrou is 47.73. I mean, that's like the biggest, I guess, leap there. So I think there is an argument to be made, whenever Buchnevich is being played without a player like Jordan Kyrou or without a player like Robert Thomas, that can be a reason for his struggles. But lately we've seen him alongside Robert Thomas a lot, and like you said, these past few games he has not had a point since that Anaheim game. Is that right? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think he's been playing alongside Robert Thomas in those games. So I mean, maybe it's a line issue. Like I don't know, but it is a little bit concerning from Buchnevich. Not like you said. I wouldn't say it's concerning for his extension and his career, but I think it's concerning for their hopes this season, because he was obviously supposed to be a big part of what they're trying to do this season. And yeah, I think we've exhausted that point a little bit. But one interesting thing from the Utah game last night was that top line of was it Neighbors Thomas Buchnevich again last night?
I think it was
Um,
Neighbors. Yeah.
uh,
Yep.
they had a pretty horrid first period. It was pretty bad. They just looked like they weren't trying all that much. I don't think I don't think overuse was an issue. They had a day of rest after the Thursday game against Calgary. Um, I don't know what it was. It just looked like a lack of effort defensively, a sloppy effort offensively, and they got benched. They didn't play, I believe, like the last between 9 and 10 minutes of the first period, except for Neighbors got in on, I believe, like the end of a power play at one point. But um, I mean, that's a big issue. I hope that shouldn't become a trend for this top line. But I mean, do you have anything to talk about with what we saw from them last night?
I don't know. I think just more of the same. That just they're getting out to really slow starts too, which puts
Yeah.
them further behind, which adds more
Yes.
pressure,
Yeah.
which then makes them feel like they have to catch up, and it just isn't really a recipe for success. Versus, and maybe it really is just like Shen, Kairu, Holloway being second liners, sort of knowing that they have a little bit more
Hmm.
looseness to play with. You need to find a way, and really, I think it's Montgomery needs to find a way to let them play more loose and less stiff. I mean, Neighbors really like without the puck, and honestly, if he's not right in front of the goal or down low, has kind of been a negative for this team. The other parts of his
Hmm.
game have just not developed at all this year, specifically like helping to create offensive opportunities, not even like scoring chances, just like possession. Neighbors really struggles with um, when he wins a battle to maintain possession or to make like a low risk pass, which Colton Pareko is so good at. Why he's an offensive force. He always knows how to maintain possession and get an easy look to keep the skates going. With Neighbors, it's just such a stop and start game that it just like the kid plays with his head on fire, and it's
Yeah.
awesome and it's super fun to watch, and he takes a ton of penalty minutes because he gets in a ton of fights, and he's so fun. But that's not the kind of player you want to be giving first line minutes to. I think that's the other
Yeah.
thing is Neighbors in a first line role has really just not been the fit. I think
Yeah.
I love the guy, but you'd almost like to see him on maybe that third line to where the defensive ability of a Radek Faxa, who probably should be 3C over Sunquist, but I guess that's just my opinion, um, could help out his poor defensive ability, and his like fire could really get something going in reduced minutes,
Yeah.
in extended minutes on the first line. Those deficiencies hurt more than his really quick hitting offensive game.
Yeah, in his defense a little bit, like I think honestly what we're seeing from him, he had that breakout year last year, right? Scored 27 goals. We were like, oh my God, Jake Nevers, he's that guy. And I think what we saw, from him last year was people didn't quite know what he was, and so they didn't know they weren't as familiar with his game. They didn't know how to prep for him, on a game to game basis. And I think what we're seeing this season is, guys kind of know who he is and what he does, and I think they're defending him as such. Which on one hand is good. You know, it's good that you have performed to such a point where you get noticed, and other teams make a point of addressing you, right? I think that's a sign of respect in a lot of ways. But that is an issue when his game is maybe a little bit single sided when it comes to goal scoring. I guess single faceted. I don't know what the
Hmm.
right term is
Yeah.
there. When it comes to scoring goals, it is pretty much he's kind of like a one trick pony right now, in terms of
It's a
just
good
setting.
trick.
It is a good trick, and it got results last year. But when other teams figure that out and they start to defend you, and they know what you're trying to do, it does get a lot tougher. So what I'm hoping to see from him, and I think what we're hopefully starting to see a little bit lately, is that adaptation, which I think is the biggest struggle for a lot of young players. They come up, they're good, they're an unknown quantity, and because other teams aren't as familiar with them, they have success. And I think that's what we saw from Jake Neighbors. Where the struggle is when they start to figure you out. How do you adapt? How do you continue that success? And how do you grow your game in like a more holistic way? And so I'm hoping that that is a point of focus for Jake Neighbors for the rest of this season and beyond. But
Yeah,
um,
I want to add too because Jake Neighbors is my boy.
yeah,
That I don't want to just be piling on him here.
yeah,
I
yeah,
still think he's a really, really valuable player. I think
for
there's just
sure.
been he is. I think we have to remember that he's 22, and
Yeah, for sure.
I think putting a 22-year-old on the first line is a big ask, and Neighbors wasn't quite up to the task, and that's okay because he's 22,
Yeah,
only now about to start his second contract, so still will be a Blue for a long time until he's 20, 25, 26 at least,
hmm,
uh, and he's still being a productive player, and, the same thing could be said about Jordan Kyrou at the start of his career. Robert Thomas to an extent, although Robert Thomas was just is and was a better player, but there were all growing pains for these guys. And I think we're
yeah,
seeing Jake Neighbors growing pains. And we need to see, if he wants more minutes, what has to happen is those other elements of his game, like skating, knowing where to be skating without the puck on his stick, knowing how to use his body better defensively, knowing how to use his body better to assist his teammates. All of that has to come along. But again, he's such a young player who's really only playing in his second full NHL season. And really,
yeah.
he wasn't even like this was supposed to be his first NHL season. It's just he couldn't stop scoring last year. So they couldn't send him down. But yeah, with Neighbors, like I totally expect it all to come around. I think we're just seeing a sophomore slump, and he's still going to be super valuable. It's just I think we jumped the gun a little bit on Jake Neighbors.
Maybe a little. But yeah, like you said, he is still really young. I think he could still work his way into being a solid top line guy,
Oh yeah.
potentially. But like you said, it takes time, and he is super young. He's already tied his assists number from last season at 11. So I mean,
Yes.
in terms of like that side of his game, that's an improvement, right? He's making more plays and helping facilitate offensive production a little bit more, and I think that's exciting. He probably won't have as many goals scored as last season. And I think that's probably another reason why the Blues are struggling. He was a top forward for them last year, and part of the formula going into this season as to why we could see it being successful is if he can score close to 30 goals again, or potentially get more than 30 goals, that would be, um, a huge help. And he probably won't quite get there. Um, Again, as a player and thinking about his development, that's not a big issue. I think he'll continue to grow. But looking at the Blues' playoff hopes, it does make the picture a little tougher. But to that point, before we move on, I think that's a big reason why it's really good that Jim Montgomery is back in the organization. He was a big part of Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou's their development as young forwards. Excuse me. Um, and a big reason why they were sort of able to develop their all around game, their offensive game, right after coming up. And so I think it's fantastic that a guy like that who can have that rapport with the younger guys and help sort of squeeze a little more toothpaste out of the tube, or I don't know, juice out of the orange. I don't know whatever that expression is. I think having a guy like that in Montgomery's role could be huge for a guy like Neighbors. And I think we're seeing that from Dylan Holloway, who's a similar player. I'm just hoping in the subsequent seasons for the Blues that's what we see for Jake Neighbors. And I think if the Blues hope to make the playoffs, we're going to have to see him maybe pick it up a little bit. But like you said, maybe we're starting to see that a little bit. So I think that would be a huge help for sure. One issue that I want to highlight real quick is just the shots on goal. Like they're just not generating shots on goal as a team to the point that you want a playoff team to be doing it. On the season, they have generated 2,341 shots on goal. The league average is 2,561.5. So they are not keeping up with the rest of the league. They don't have great offensive zone time numbers. And I think that's hurting them a lot. Just where you're spending most of your time is an issue. But another issue at times, I think, is the inconsistency of the goaltending. Joel Hofer is a goalie that, despite having some mediocre to maybe even poor, like under the hood numbers, like his advanced analytics numbers don't look great. Despite that, he is looking okay, like save percentage wise, and his record looks fine. Jordan Bennington, on the other hand, looks a little better under the hood. I mean, not great, but like I don't think as bad as Hofer looks. And I'm talking advanced analytics. But Jordan Bennington has been like frustratingly inconsistent. But I want to throw this to you. What have you seen from the goaltenders in this recent stretch, and how could that be complicating the situation, or looking forward, how could that hopefully help them out if they're trying to get back in a playoff spot?
Yeah, it really is so frustrating because just how incongruent it all is, like you said.
Yeah.
Joel Hofer's advanced analytics, you mentioned, aren't so good, but his regular stats are. Um, Jordan Bennington is the opposite. So Hofer has a -5 goal saved above expected, which is kind of like the gospel for goalie metrics of how good a goalie is. -5 isn't terrible, but it's pretty bad. It gets negative, but it isn't like an unplayable number. Right now, he ranks 48th in the NHL among goalies with minimum 13 starts, which is pretty bad. I want to say the list. Actually, I have it right here. That's 48th of 57, so that is like really at the bottom. But it isn't quite like Philip Grubauer, who's the worst right now at -14. So it's not unplayable by any means. But like you said, his season stats and his January stats look pretty good. This in January, he's got a 2-1-0 record with a 911 save percentage. That's pretty good. On the season, he's got a 906 save percentage and a 10-4-1 record. That's really good. Jordan Bennington, like you said, his goal saved above expected is positive, so we've hit positive with Bennington at 1.5, which ranks 29th in the NHL of that same minimum 13 starts. So 29th is nothing to write home about. And in the month of January, Bennington has a 2-3-0 record, which isn't good. But he's got a 912 save percentage, which is actually pretty good, and a shutout. Like, it's just so bizarre what's going on with
Yeah.
the goaltending. Sometimes it feels like that those could be skewed by some bad games. Giving up 4 to Utah last night doesn't help. That Minnesota game was really skewing things as a 6-4 loss,
Yeah.
and
2.5.
6 goals allowed the game before against Columbus. So I think the stats here. I don't ever want to say you can throw stats out, but I feel like with goalies, that's the one position you could maybe make the argument. I don't want to totally throw them out, but I think they're not really. I mean, they're not really painting any picture here, and I don't think they're painting a clear picture. It just feels like it isn't working, and it feels like it's when that bad goal goes in, like when a shot sneaks by Hofer's pad and gets under him, or when Bennington can't quite get his glove in the right spot to stop a medium danger chance. Then it just feels like that really just disheartens the team, and the boys don't have their tenders back, and that's kind of a very non-statistical of way of a way of saying that just the vibes seem off with the goaltending, and that's really all I can say because the stats are, like I said, are just so like hit or miss.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I don't think there's a whole lot to break down beyond what you did. I think that's a pretty good summary of what we're seeing. I will say, like, Montgomery and the Blues have expressed uh, like pretty solid faith in these guys. I think Montgomery said he would take this tandem over any tandem in the league. Um, Obviously, as their coach, he's got to say something like that. But I mean, this can still be a really good tandem. We saw it last year. It's unfair to expect them to do that again, both of them, all season long again this year. Um, but I think if they had been doing that this season, they'd be in a playoff spot. So that's tough to see.
Yeah,
Um, for sure. But hopefully they'll sort of clean things up as these games start to matter more. I think that's another thing that we see from Jordan Binnington is when the games matter, he can has this ability to lock in, and so hopefully that's what we'll see from them. But I mean, I say that this game against Utah, it mattered a whole lot, right? They this was an important one for the wild card race. It was an important one for them as a team to mentally break through that barrier of of a measly 3 wins in a row. And they just he just went out there and gave up 4 goals on 33 shots. That's not a way to win, and so that's a
yeah,
huge issue. But I don't think there's a
yeah.
whole lot more to break down on that front.
I just want to add that like
Yeah,
goaltending is such a huge part of
yeah,
stringing together a win streak, and also if we're
right,
comparing with last season, like kind of like what you said, when the goaltending was so exceptional, that they don't have that to fall back on this year. So the goaltending isn't winning them games; it's keeping
yeah,
them in games, but it isn't winning them games, and we just don't really have the high end talent to add to that to win us games that we shouldn't be, which
for
is
sure,
why we're kind of hovering around, 500 record or
for
points
sure.
percentage.
Yeah, that's a good point there. So let's shift now to the big question: can they still make the playoffs? Can they recover from this stretch of poor play? Before we do, if you're just tuning in or if you're new to No News, we'd appreciate if you would like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you like to listen to audio, and we're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok over on that side of the screen at Note News Pod, where we post a lot of other cool stuff. So if you want to tune into our live streams once or twice a week, we'd appreciate that as well. Yeah, leave us comments. Let us know your thoughts on the Blues. Can they make the playoffs? If you're watching live, let us know in the chat. Is the season over? Should they even try? Can they make the playoffs? What are your thoughts on the Blues' chances this season? Um, I want to first add a little bit of context to our discussion, so we don't have to get into this um, later. But just like looking ahead, the Blues kind of have like a gauntlet coming up for the next, I mean, for the next little while. They've got back to backs against Vegas. They're going to play Dallas, Vancouver, and Colorado to close out the month of January. That's 4 different teams that like are solid teams. Made the playoffs last year. Have a good chance to make the playoffs this year. Um, those that this back to back against Vegas is going to be especially tough. They are kind of the brass of the NHL right now, one of the best teams in the league. They have an outside, maybe not an outside shot, but they have a shot at the President's Trophy this year. Um, and so this is going to be a tough month of February. In the first little bit of or month of January. In the first little bit of February, they've got Utah, Edmonton, Florida, and Chicago before the break for Four Nations Face-Off. 3 solid teams: Utah, Edmonton, and Florida. That's going to be tough. The rest of February, you're playing Winnipeg, Colorado, Seattle, Washington, and then into March, it doesn't get any easier. You're playing Minnesota, Dallas, the Kings in there, Vancouver again. Like this is a tough time of year, and the time to sort of pick up that cushion against the easier teams, it's kind of past. The chance, the opportunity to put together a solid win streak to, like I said, give you that cushion when it comes to getting this tougher schedule, especially when you start to play more in division opponents. The Central Division is really tough. It's not going to be easy when you're playing these guys, these other teams. It's going to be an uphill battle for the Blues, who, like we said, currently are 3 points out of a playoff spot. If they want to make the playoffs, they're going to have to get that second wild card at this point. And they're, in competition with a lot of good teams right now. Can they get it done? Alec, I want to get your thoughts on this first. Do you think the Blues can get it done? Do you think they will get it done? Just what do you want to add to this sort of playoff discussion here?
Hmm. Well, I think anyone who has been listening to Note News knows my answer to this. I just want to say that, like, if you are a believer in the Blues playoff chances, like, this is the time for them to maybe start to shake up the standings a little bit. Some of the teams you listed that they're going to be playing, Dallas, Vancouver, Colorado, Utah, and maybe even Seattle. Like, those are games that if you win them, that's when you not only start to build, like, a better points percentage, more wins on the board, but start to actually, like, shake up the standings for some of these other teams. These are some of the teams you need to fall out of favor
Yeah,
to get that playoff spot. Maybe you could still hope on the other route would be that if the Kings, who are right now at a measly 55 points, could be leapfrogged by Vancouver or Calgary, then you've got the Kings to beat. But it kind of just looks like the Kings are the more complete team, so that seems pretty far fetched. But once again, like, these are the teams that they need to beat. That if you are a playoff team, like, you should be getting wins from some of these opponents, because
yeah,
when it comes to making the playoffs, these are the teams you're gonna have to be playing, or
right.
at least the same caliber. And if you can't hang against them in a regular season game, then I don't want to see my team get embarrassed on a national stage in a 7 game set. Like, prove your metal. I'm
Yeah,
still out on them making the dance this year, but if things can really start to click, it really feels like they're just so close. And honestly, like, I'm a lot closer to saying they're in than I was at any point throughout the season, which is crazy because they're further out than they've been throughout the rest of the season. But I think the things that I'm seeing look so much better than I thought this team ever could have been this season. So
yeah.
they're so close. If they can get that right, whatever it is, to click and to go on a run here, then I'll be bought in. But
Yeah.
they haven't shown they're able to do it, and I'm still waiting to see it happen.
How Blues would it be if the first time they get three wins in a row is against Vegas, and Dallas? That would be so funny. Like they can't get it done against like Calgary and Utah, or you know whatever poor Anaheim, Columbus, and Calgary or whatever, and if they could against all these fantastic teams, that would just be feels like the most Blues thing ever, playing up to those good opponents and down to the bad ones. But I think I think right now where I'm at, and I know I made a big point of saying I would be bought in.
You've been back and forth. You've been
I've been going back and forth. I think
all
where
over
I'm
the
at right
map.
now is I'm not ready to be bought in, but I'm not out. I think if they had beaten Utah, I texted you this yesterday before the game. If they had beaten Utah, I would have been in. Like that would have been it. Whatever happens, for the next little bit, even if it's a rough stretch, I would be bought in. But they didn't, and I don't know, man. I mean, right now, it doesn't look good. If they go through the rest of January and just get whooped up on by these five teams, or sorry, four teams, um, it could be looking a lot more dismal for the Blues. Honestly, if they can string out like 2 wins from that stretch, I would feel pretty good about that. If they can, get a win over either Vegas or Dallas, and then if they can beat Vancouver, I would feel a lot better about this team, because Vancouver is one of the teams you are
That's a
uh,
huge game
competing with for this wild card spot. They
because
they
they're
stand
floundering.
yeah, they stand between you and the Calgary Flames right now. And so if they can, jump them and get into that spot, that would be huge for them. Uh, so this will be an important 2 weeks here, an important, I guess, week and a half through the end of January. Um, it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough.
I think that is kind of telling that the vibes in Vancouver are so bad right now,
Right.
and they're still like higher than us in the standings. I will say though, I really liked what you said that I'm not sold yet. Like we're not selling, throwing the towel in on this team.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I'm so with you there. Despite me having said and still maintaining that I don't think we're quite there yet, I'm
Yeah.
still not out on this team. Like they're
Right.
so close and they're so much more talented than their record shows, which
For sure.
is a cool place to be in for the future. But for the
Yeah.
right now, it's really frustrating.
Definitely really frustrating. It's like you see the flashes of it on the ice. You can see them performing in that solid way, and it just doesn't translate, or at least hasn't yet. Um, a couple comments in the chat. If the first line can start to click and help them, that would be huge. Totally agree. I mean, like we're where we're seeing a lot of offensive consistency is surprisingly from the second line, like we broke down earlier in the episode. Holloway, Shin, Kyrou, and then Colton Parayko and Cam Fowler have generated a ton of offense as well as the top
Hmm.
defensive pair. That's been huge. So I think I'd agree if they can get two lines clicking, just give me two forward lines that can click. That's all I ask. It feels like too little to ask for out of a team with playoff hopes. But if it's like please, can your top line be good at hockey? It feels a little weird to ask for, but yeah, I totally agree. If Robert Thomas can lock back in, he was locked in December. If he can lock back in and drive that offense from the top line, that could help me buy back in. So I mean that would be huge. But Sean, who commented that, followed up. But it has to happen right now. Totally agreed. Um, and then another comment saying, I'm not worried about the teams better than us, but the teams below us, we can't seem to beat. That has been especially true of Utah, who we just
They got our
can't.
number. Yeah.
They got our number. Clayton Keller, Logan Cooley, those guys know what to do against the Blues. We are 0-2 against them, and we've got another matchup against them at the beginning of February. So that one's gonna be big for this race. And I agree. It's not enough to just think about the teams that they've got to jump. You also got to think about the teams that could jump them. So that is a big part of this discussion as well. Um, any last thoughts on the Blues playoff aspirations? I mean, what do you want to see? Let's close out with this. What do you want to see out of them to close out January? It could be on ice play. It could be record. What do you want to see from them to sort of help the team show you that they're capable of making a playoff push?
Well, I want the team to win every game and score 100 goals and get shutouts in every game. Um,
Nice.
I think the way that I feel, I know you said end of January, but I'm going to cheat and say the rest of the season. I think that this is a really, really good, whatever happens, playoffs or no, buyers or sellers at the deadline, or if we do nothing at the deadline, I think this is a really, really good thing for this team, this organization, this franchise right now.
Yeah.
Because you know that playoffs are on the players' minds. As you
Yeah.
said, Doug Armstrong doesn't want to lose, doesn't want to miss the playoffs in what 3 years, 4 years straight now. I think
Three
it would
three
be
years straight.
three. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Jim Montgomery is a winning head coach, and he wants to win. He wants to make the playoffs. That's one of the things he's been emphasizing in all of his interviews. The players in their interviews are being accountable, saying they need to be better so that we can make the playoffs. The
Yeah.
broadcast is talking about it constantly.
Yeah.
The energy around this team is we need to fight to make the playoffs. And win or lose, playoffs or no, I do believe that pressure makes diamonds. And we're going to find out who on this team is able to contribute and who on this team could be, a piece you could ship off, or someone that you could that maybe isn't quite there yet, or well, it'll answer a lot of questions. We went into this season saying that this was a big year for answering questions, and I think we're getting a lot of those questions answered. And I think this season is just really, really helpful for the development of so many players and our front office and organization as a whole too. This is probably the best possible season that Alex Steen could have to learn how to run
Yeah.
a hockey team, and the frustrations that come with that, and what you
Yeah.
need to do to get over those frustrations, or what happens when you fall short of that.
Yeah.
All of this is just building and building, and I think is really going to test this team. And honestly, I'm not even thinking about like the end of January or the end of the season. Like this team, this franchise, this organization right now, I feel like is a sleeping giant waiting to emerge as a Stanley Cup contender once again. The pieces are all there. The flashes are there. I should say the pieces are almost there.
The foundation is
Um,
there.
the foundation is there. The
Yeah.
flashes are there. We have our number one defenseman. We have a number two defenseman. We have our number one center. We have our number one winger. We have our number two winger. We have we keep talking about we need that one offensive scoring threat, but our goaltending tandem is great. Our prospects are phenomenal. The depth is there for the prospects. And guys like Snuggerud and Dvorsky could really light this team up, let alone what happens this offseason.
Yeah.
Like this franchise, this organization is so close, not just to competing for playoffs again, but for competing for Stanley Cups. And I think this season is really, really helpful in accelerating that path and keeping us on the right path. That I am just so excited to see where it lands, especially like coming into next season. Now, that is, it'll take a lot of time to get there, exercise patience. So, what I want to see towards the end of January, to answer your question, is I really want to see this team continue to fight and to push and to not throw the towel in, because we're not giving up on this team. They don't want to give up either. They're clearly showing that. I don't want to see them mail it in and give up another freaking 4-2 loss. That makes me so upset in games that we should be winning. I want to see them take the Stars to overtime. I want to see them give either Aiden Hill or not Logan Thompson, I forget who their backup is, but a run for his money.
Yeah.
I want to see Colton Parayko show why he was selected for the Four Nations roster and show Quinn Hughes what he's made of. I want to see these flashes, and I want to see them more consistently, because that's how you build a good culture, organization, franchise. Win or loss record, I don't really know what I'm expecting here, but I just want to see growth, and I want to see these boys fight hard.
Couldn't have said it better myself. You're firing me up. I like it. Anything I say is just going to bring us down a little bit, because I think I would focus more on like on ice play and stuff. So I'm going to leave it there. That's a fantastic way to end it. But I agree. Like rebuilding is tough. And I really like what we've seen from the Blues this season. And I agree. The pieces are there. And the future is bright. I mean, there's no better way to say it. I think you said it well. So I think why not call it there?
5 years of Jim Montgomery.
5 years of Jim Montgomery. Alex Steen is ready to take the reins. They got the future in mind. It's looking good. We got Dylan Holloway. He looks so good. Philip Broberg, if he can get something together again, whew, this could be a team, man. And if they go out and acquire a star player, maybe even a star and a like B-level player, something like that, that could really elevate this team. You got Jimmy Snuggerud waiting in the wings, ready to be a threat from the wing. Yeah. And
had another 2-goal night, like last night, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, the future is bright.
He's so good. He's so good.
He's so good. And I'm so excited to see what we see out of this team. So excited to see what we get out of this team next season. And but for the rest of this season, I'm still hopeful. I think they can do it. But like you said, I'm looking for them to prove their mettle and show some fight against these teams here. We saw that from like Jordan Kyrou talking about like we're treating every game like a playoff game. That's how they should be treating it at this point. And that's exactly what I want to see. Build that winning culture, build that fighting culture, especially when you have a lot of young players that are going to hopefully be a big part of this team moving forward. So I totally agree. Throughout the rest of January and the rest of the year, that's what I want to see as well. So couldn't have said it better myself. Got me fired up. Let's go Blues, baby. So if you're new to Note News, or if you haven't already, we'd appreciate it if you would like this video. That'll do it for us today. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow and rate the podcast wherever you listen. And follow us at Note News Pod on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. We'd appreciate that. We post a lot of cool stuff, and you can keep up with us and see when we're going live on usually Sundays and Wednesdays. And so, yeah, stay tuned. We appreciate it. And we'll talk about the rest of the Blues season as it comes, and hopefully we'll have more good to talk about rather than bad. But we'll see what we see, man. That'll do it for us today. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. And Alec, let's go Blues.
Let's go Blues.